Since the dawn of civilization, spies of every nation and culture have worked to infiltrate their adversaries and glean the information that will give their side the advantage. The stakes are sky high, the strategies varied and imaginative, and the ultimate sign of success is that no one ever even knew you were there. In each episode, we will explore the moral and ethical gray zones of espionage, where treachery and betrayal go hand in hand with cunning and courage. This is the Spycraft 101 podcast. Welcome to your clandestine classroom. This is episode number 34 of the Spycraft 101 podcast. With me right now is Luis Moreno, a commander with the Nicaraguan Contras, who led his men in unconventional warfare against the Nicaraguan Sandinista government for more than 6 years, from 1982 through 1988. He was in close combat many times over the years and was seriously wounded more than once, including losing most of his right arm in a mortar explosion, but Luis always returned to the fight again. During the latter half of the conflict, Luis also led the Contra's counterintelligence efforts to keep Sandinista infiltrators from joining their ranks. I invited Luis onto this podcast to hear about his experiences fighting in a brutal war with the support of the U.S. government and Central Intelligence Agency against an enemy that was armed, trained, and equipped by the Soviet Union, Cuba, and other governments. Luis, thank you for agreeing to this interview.
Well, thank to you, Justin. I am very glad to share with all of you my knowledge about what I did, what happened in Nicaragua during the Cold War.
I'm glad to hear it. It's an incredible story, for sure. I'm very happy that I was able to make contact with you. And, it took me many tries before we actually spoke for the first time.
Yes, we had another life, so we had another compromise. So we worked, and so that's why most probably.
Of course. I'm glad I stuck with it because once we finally got to talk I was really happy to hear that you would speak about your experiences. I know that you were one of the key figures among the Contras for the entire war, from what I've seen and read. How did you go from being a young officer in the Nicaraguan National Guard to a commander in an unconventional warfare group?
Well, first of all, you have to know that war is a unique place when experience that you get in the combat field sometimes can be done by your training. I was training to be an officer in the National Guard, and also the desire to combat against the communists. The communists were terrible. I never saw people so terrible that the communists. So I was anti-communist in a way, but I was no anti-communist because I wanted, because the thing happened and I had to make a decision. And that's why I went to the Contra war, because I believe I don't like the communists. And I don't like the way they treated my country. So I believe my country deserves something else. So that's why I went to war. My determination was to win at all costs, even my life and the life of so many of my men.
Well, you certainly lived up to that promise, because I know that you went through a whole lot, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes here. I'd like to get a little bit of background first, because most of my listeners are Americans, and most of us only know about the war in Nicaragua from the Iran-Contra affair and Oliver North. And so I would like to know a little bit about the background. What was it that led to the communist revolution and the takeover in 1979? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, it's very difficult to people to understand that today because they don't live the Cold War. The Cold War was the war between United States and the Soviet Union, signed the end of the World War II. Latin American, which was composed about for 20 small countries, has about 19 guerrillas movement, included the Sandinista Liberation Front in Nicaragua. And at some point, United States was fighting the Cold War in Latin America because they were supporting about 17 dictatorial government like Somoza. I was a young man, but I learned the thing by heart because when I come over to be an officer, I went directly to war. Why? Because the government in United States decided to not support the military regime of Somoza. And that helped to all Latin America to change to new democracy government, which is like is today, exception the Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. But in that time, there was around 17 right dictatorial government, and they were 19 guerrillas movement. The only one that win was the Sandinista Liberation Front because United States allowed the Somoza regime to be destroyed completed. The National Guard was completely destroyed because United States allowed it. Later, the communists went to try to take over on Salvador, and Mr. Reagan, who came over after Mr. Carter, decided to help the Salvadorian government, which was changing from a dictatorial right-wing military government to a new, recently democratic government. So it was a product of the Cold War.
Yes, there was so much conflict in so many places there in Central America over those years. I know that there was conflict in Guatemala, El Salvador. Of course, you spent a lot of time in Honduras with the cross-border raids. And there was even some stuff in Costa Rica, I think you mentioned. It's like the entire peninsula was at war in one form or another throughout the 1980s. Is that right?
That's right. Beginning in the 60s, after the Cuban Revolution, Fidel Castro take power, the Soviet Union began to help all the left guerrillas in all Latin America. So that was the product after the Cuban Revolution.
So these Sandinistas were the only ones who were successful in overturning a Latin American government during that time. Is that what you said?
Yes, it is. Was because Mr. Carter changed the mind and began to stop the help to the military regime like Somoza.
I see. And of course, you had just joined the military as a young officer when the revolution happened. So my question to you, first of all, is I've read many things about the Somoza regime, and there are some good reasons, perhaps, that Carter ended the support of that regime because of brutality and that sort of thing. So when you were fighting over the years, when you were fighting against the Sandinistas, was it just for the people of Nicaragua, or were you in support still of the previous government?
No. The previous government was completely destroyed. Most of the United States helped the Sandinistas in a way to take over. Brutality, that's not mean nothing for me. I was soldiering in two wars. Both sides are used to be brutal because that is the nature of the war. Even United States, when attack Iraq, attack with weapons. How do you go to fight? All fighting is terrible. All fighting is something different. People have to understand. Somoza regime do many bad things. Everybody do bad things. That's my point. But in the contrast, United States and everybody was not willing to return to the Contra. The Contra don't going to support Somoza. Somoza was already dead. And United States also, I believe the Contras was the most successful situation for the CIA. We win because we went to peace agreement and the war ended in a stalemate. No, they don't win, we don't win. So we were into a peace agreement. I was in charge of the second military talking in Savoie. So I believe brutality is innate in all war.
That's certainly true, for sure. So let's go back to, I think it was 1979. You had just graduated from the military academy just a few weeks before, and you were already fighting in the city. Is that right? You were very young, like 20 or 21 years old, I think?
I was 20.
20?
I was 20. And I was fighting in a horrible fighting in a city is terrible. It's horrible and terrible because every angle of your movement can be the last one. So many officers and so many soldiers was killed by sniper, which were very easy to be hide from the sight of everybody. You just hear the bullet. That's the way it is. And I was even wounded at the last day of fighting.
Yes, I think that you mentioned that someone from your unit, I don't recall if it was from the academy or from your new unit, they were caught and that person was burned alive by the Sandinistas at the very end. Is that right? You tried to rescue them and you were unable to get there in time?
Was a soldier, young soldier. He was just burned alive when we tried to rescue him, and was a terrible sight. See one of your friend or soldier or your like NCO killed by a mob who was very happy to kill him. That's war. That's what I tell.
Yeah, it was terrible stuff.
Yeah.
For my fine listeners, I just want to preface this by saying that Luis has published his memoirs in Spanish. They're available on Amazon right now, and he also provided me an unpublished English language manuscript before the interview, so I was able to read a lot of what he's written, so I'm already pretty familiar with his story, and I wanted to share it with you because it's not currently available for purchase. So, Luis, why is it that the Sandinistas succeeded in overthrowing Somoza in 1979? Was it simply because the U.S. withdrew support, or were there other reasons as well?
A country like Nicaragua, which is very small, I believe Florida is 5 times Nicaragua. Florida, Nicaragua is so small that it's 1/5 of Florida. Was supported, and we has no economic advantage. We has no way to support a war. So Somoza regime was destroyed because Mr. Carter stopped to selling him weapon, and also the weaponry that he can get from Israel was stopped. So we had a blockade from United States. So it's like you put a donkey with a tiger. We were the donkey, and the tiger was, tiger.
Oh, wow.
Kill us. That's the way that happened. The national war at the last month was short of ammunition, short of everything. The NCO were deserting, and everybody was in disarray because nobody wanted to be caught with that equipment against a very well-equipped army at the Sandinista front was, in a way, because was supported by Cuba, Venezuela, Panama, and also the Soviet Union. So they were full of equipment, we were short of equipment. That's the way it is. You never go to win a battle with a donkey against a tiger. No way.
Wow, I can understand that. It sounds like you were fighting an entire alliance, not just a bunch of local rebels anyway.
Yes, it's the way that what happened. I don't want to defend Somoza regime. Can be bad. I defend my my integrity, my life, and I fight as a soldier because I was so naive that I don't know what is happening to my surroundings. You always are, a person when you are a young officer. You believe in principle, like die before wrong, before to be defeated, and so the stupid thing that you as a young guy believe. And I was a young officer determined to die rather to escape or rather to, because I believe my country need to be with Somoza in a way, because I don't have another measure. I don't know too many things. So many of us just were like soldiers, fight against the enemy. That's it.
Okay, I understood. Yeah, your perspective was limited to your experiences, and as a new young man in the military, you didn't have anything else to compare it to, but you certainly saw the brutality of the rebels who were taking over. So how did you escape, and how did you survive when so many other people were killed in the final days of the Somoza government?
Well, I was wounded in the 18th of July. I was into an ambush, and I was wounded in my back. So I was thinking I was be dead in a very soon time because I was bleeding in my back. So my fellow officer Aguilar take me to the hospital, and that was the end of the work for me in a hospital. And my friend and all the unit was killed in the next day. All of them are dead.
And you were there in the hospital by yourself?
Yes, and I was with two other officers and tried to escape. And the Sandinista captured me in a place named Cebaco. I was captured by them because one of the Sandinistas was a neighbor where I live in a poor place in a small neighborhood in Managua, and that guy knew that I was in the National Guard. But I was able to convince his boss another Sandinista that I was know what he said. And they sent me to Managua. And so when I was back in Managua from Sebaco, which was about 60 kilometers north of Managua, I went to the Spain embassy where I stayed for 2 months until I escaped with a friend help to Costa Rica when I began to work and do and prepare myself for the new work that I was thinking will be very soon when Mr. Reagan took power in the United States.
So you made it to Costa Rica, and you were wounded, like you said, and
Well, my wound was the bullet went into my back, but hit the magazine, the three magazine of the M16 that I was carrying as my weapon. So the wound was so little, but when you are in the dark and you are fighting, you don't know. I just feel the hit of my blood, which was down, but so many damage. The bullet only damaged my skin pretty much.
Okay, that's good. So you were able to keep moving then after that.
Oh, perfect. I was very glad. It was a lucky shot, if you want to see, because all my friend, three cadets, and one of my fellow classmates are dead, and I don't know how many men of the 60 men patrol that we went to previous day are dead already.
So there were very few of you left. How did you make contact with the others who would become the Contras later on? How did you find them? How did you organize to go back into Nicaragua?
That was a very difficult situation for somebody who was in the South, because in the South was not very easy. But at some point, I went to Panama in '81, and later I moved out to Guatemala because my goal was fighting Nicaragua or do something else. Maybe I was supposed to be coming to United States as many as my friends who come out went back. So, but I didn't. I was not willing. I went to the military academy in the U.S. Latin American Cadet Exchange in August '78, and I was not willing to be away back in the United States. So I was waiting that the thing will happen and the war is coming because United States changed his mind. Mr. Reagan was anti-communist. I read Mr. Reagan, which I admire because was a clear mind. He was a man who knows that the communists had to be stopped, and they created the Contras army with the help of some of the Mr. Clarridge was the first person who created the Duane Clarridge created the Contra. I was surviving in Latin America, and when I went to Guatemala, a fellow friend they saying, we are going to work, we are going to fight again. And I was willing to do so. I was working as the chief bodyguard of Coronel Jorge Mario Reyes Porras in Guatemala. I was his chief of security. I was willing to go back. And so as soon as somebody, a friend of mine, Coronel Gomez, tell me, hey, Luis, do you want to go into the Contras army, into the FDN, Democratic Forces? Yes, I can. And I went, and I don't sign up. I just went to a venture. I was with so many people who were creating the Contras. The Contra was created because the remnant of the National Guard were a few of them were still in Honduras, or because they were so poor that they cannot pay to come into the United States. Most of them come over, but into the Contras was created for some point where 427 National Guard, about 18,000 or more people from the Nicaraguan who were Sandinistas. Some of them were just a simple person from the hillbillies, like it can be said, I don't know. But all those, we were ready to pay the price, and the National Guard men paid 386, around the 80% of the National Guard who went into the Contra are dead already, because most of them come over to United States and make a new life, as we do when we ended the Contras war.
So by the end of the conflict, 80% of the original volunteers?
National Guard, ex-National Guard, because they come over, a lot of NCO from the National Guard who come over into the Contras army, and 80% of them are dead.
That's incredible. That's so high.
in the 7 year of war.
Wow.
The war was for me from 82 to 89. I was in war 2,820 days.
2,820 days.
Yes.
My gosh. Well, I'm very glad that you made it out alive, because it seems like that was no easy feat at all.
Well, I make this team because somebody in Nicaragua asked me, how long did you fight? Because I say, I went into the contract, but for 10 days. Oh, for a month. No, I was 2,820 in both wars.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. So I want to ask you, I know that almost everyone who joined the Contras took another name to fight under. You went by Mike Lima, right? And many others did as well. Why is it that you chose to use another name?
The guerrilla warfare is something very old. Everybody who is in a guerrilla, the context how to do so. So even the regular army fighting guerrillas, they use a mote or pseudonimo or a nickname. Because it's the way that you protect your family. In my case, I was willing to get a name that was original to me. Mike Lima is Moreno, like M, Luis, Mike Lima in the international phonetic alphabet.
Okay, so basically everyone in the Contras and some of the Sandinistas as well used a pseudonym, you said?
Most of the guerrillas warfare is in that way. Nothing is new under the sun. In the sun, everybody happened already.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is new. That is something that you read and you do.
So you mentioned potential danger to the families. What, did your family make it through the war all right? Did they survive?
Oh yes, one of my brother was killed.
Your brother?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Those things happen in war. In a guerrilla warfare is dangerous for the family. When I feel that they know my name, I move my family out to Honduras. And later, well, most of my family come to United States.
Okay, that's good.
That's the way we do.
That's good. So as you mentioned, you started with, I think, 427 former National Guard in the Contras, and
No. We begin around 200 in the
200.
In the 200 men. Some of them from every side of the Nicaragua society were Sandinistas that were against their friend already, and some of them were National Guard. But at the peak, we had 427 National Guard ex-guardsmen, and they were killed 386 because my boss, who was an engineer, Colonel Enrique Bermudez, he was very good at numbers. He want everybody do numbers. They want to know everything. And also the CIA asked for many data. So we have data, and I was a man who has data because I work with those.
I see. So starting with this very small number of volunteers, what was your strategy to defeat this new Sandinista government? They had a large army. They were heavily armed. How were you going to retake Nicaragua with just a few hundred people?
Well, if you feel the people who make war is people different from everybody else. Some of them are idealist ideology play a role, or some of them are professional, and most of them are the poor people. This is the mix of a regular conventional army. So a few of them, it's like when you have a big bomb, you have a few. The fuse is small. The initiator is always very small. That happened in people also. So we were little people. I was one of them who was determined to succeed because we go to fight every combat put us in better position. It was horrible because we at the beginning we believed that United States will support us in a good way, but never. The United States always was playing politics. They always try to speak with the Sandinistas. They use one way, another one. It was terrible to try in a political war. It's horrible because they play the game. The game is not the fighting. The game is politics. The war is politics in another way.
Yes, I could really tell that from your biography, your autobiography, that the United States was your friend one day and a stranger the next day, and then they come back later on, and it was very difficult to maintain a relationship with them throughout the war.
Well, United States is a country divided for the same language, saying somebody, and I believe so. Everybody in Washington speak in a way that they want. Some are left, some are right, and most of them are just American. It can be deducted by you, not by me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a complex situation for sure. Once you began to run operations, I think mostly you stayed in, or you were based in Honduras, and then you would cross the border into Nicaragua once everything was organized. So how did you complete the missions that you started to run into Nicaragua?
That was one of the most important things. At the beginning, most of the Contras unit, we were around 5 bases, were created along the Honduras border, Nicaragua-Honduras border. But later, if we stay like that, we never go to achieve what we achieved. We changed the government in Nicaragua. And we do because we were willing to do so. At the end, the Contras Army created very good number of troops. We have about 18,600 troops at the peak in 85, but we also created around 7,000 irregular forces around the whole mountain area because we were fighting in the mountain because the only place where you can fight against tank and against artillery and also aviation. They have a very good equipment. So the only way to fight is in a big jungle as we did. We were controlling all the middle of the Nicaragua country. We use Honduras as a base, but most of the fighting was inside Nicaragua, very deep.
Mm-hmm. I think I recall reading that on one of your first patrols, you were incredibly successful because I don't remember the exact numbers, but you went into Nicaragua and you came out of Nicaragua with far more Contras. You had like over 100 volunteers join you and come back to Honduras after that first patrol. Is that correct?
Yes, I went into Nicaragua with 49 men, completed 57 men, and I come back with 167 new recruits in just 2 months.
2 months. Wow.
Everybody was willing to fight against the Sandinista because the Sandinista make a big, step. They do try to make all the people believe in community where, like the communists, they created a farm for many people, and they created so many asentamientos, they name it, places where they put together the people to work for, they steal the haciendas from the rich and give it to the poor. At some point, all the rich people supported the Contras Army, not just United States. United States pay the more biggest price because they pay for the weapon, but Nicaragua people pay with blood this war. No, we receive the equipment from United States, but we fight for us. We fight against the communists and we defeat it because we win. We make that they come over in a peace agreement and we have an election in 1990. So we win. That's what we want,
Mm-hmm.
to change the system. We do.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's an incredible success story how it all turns out, but it was years in the making and it was so much struggle, I can tell, and so many difficulties and obstacles. But it seems like you got the support of many of the campesinos right from the beginning because they were being forced off of their land and I think the churches were being shut down. At one point you said the Catholic churches were being closed by the Sandinistas.
Yeah, many things happen inside Nicaragua. Like the communists is against the Roman Catholic Church because the Catholic Church don't help too much to them. They are partial people in the church who help them, but in this case, most of that people want to be free. Freedom is something used for everybody to do a war, and that is one of the most beloved causes for war, freedom, and we do for freedom. So the campesinos fight for freedom, and we fight for freedom.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we do. Yeah,
I can tell. And like you said, I think in 1985 you had 18,000 Contras. You started with 200 or so.
yeah,
So many volunteers.
and yes, and at the end of the war, we were in a stalemate. The Sandinista cannot win against us, and we cannot win against them unless one of our supporters, like United States, make a big contribution. But United States was always giving us pennies for fighting
Hmm.
in comparison with what was expended by the Soviet Union.
Hmm.
Yes.
So you mentioned that you were receiving arms, and most people listening to this probably know a little bit about that already. But can you tell me what was your own personal involvement with Americans from CIA or from U.S. government? Did you meet with them face to face? I mean, did they help you personally get arms and logistical support?
No guerrillas can survive without sanctuary like we have Honduras. I met most of people at the beginning. I met General Alvarez from the Honduras Army because they met the commanders and tried to keep it because Honduras was in a fighting in a way because they don't want the communists come to their country, so they prefer to help the Contras with the help of the United States. And I met all of them. I met General Alvarez. I met Mr. Winter, was the first CIA face that we see, was a person in the CIA. Later, I met in one time in '82 Duane Clarridge, who was the big chief in the Nicaraguan project, what was named by the CIA. I met many people. At some point, we have 17 high-rank officers from United States Army who were helping us because we do the fighting, but we have equipment and we need, advisor. At some point, we have 17 high-rank officers about captain in the Contras army. They were helping generals, colonels who were helping us, like in every stage. So I met several people from the CIA and were very nice. Even the last chief after Clarridge was thrown out by the Boland Amendment. Mr. Duane Clarridge was replaced by Mr. Fair, Alan Fire. Alan Fire was the last
Hmm.
chief. And was a very nice people. I liked them, but they were like a field people who work with the contract.
Hmm. They were field people, you said?
In a way, they were in the field, Honduras, knowing the fighting. The fighting was
Yes.
done by us. Even though I met also my colonel, we received a lot of help from Oliver North. My compliment to him. So I met Oliver North. I met because that was something normal. You have many people. You have so many people. You have so many resources involved. You have to meet people who know how to use it, and they
Hmm.
were advisor. They give us advisor, and they help to survive during the difficult time, like what happened with Oliver North. I believe if he do a wrongdoing, I believe he do very well for us, because we survived thanks to him and Mr. Rigger
Hmm.
and all other like Mr. Casey, which I met once, Mr. William Casey, and all of them. Yes, I believe they helped a lot. That's the way it was.
So you had good relationship with them, and it seems like you were one of the Contra commanders that they trusted more than just about any other. Do you think that that was true? Were you one of their most trusted commanders?
No, I don't believe so. They trust us, like from my boss, who was Coronel Enrique Bermúdez Varela, who was slain in Nicaragua in '91. And they trust us because I believe we do a good job and we have a good relationship and we do our job. We were no, when I hear about the, drug involvement, we were not in drug involvement. We were in fight and I believe and I was sure we were fighting. We had no time to do to so many stupidities.
Hmm. Did the CIA, did they direct you on how they wanted you to accomplish missions, or did they simply provide equipment and arms and ammunition and that sort of thing?
I believe they are not stupid. They are not stupid in the warfare because if you want to know how to fight, go to a manual. Go to a manual. I read when I was fighting this war. I read General Chiap memories. I read Chiang Kai-shek, I read Mao Zedong, because they are expert in warfare, unconventional warfare. I don't go to read Patton, I don't go to read MacArthur. They were conventional soldiers. They were different. So it's easy. So the United States officers know how to fight, but they were not involved because the fighting was Nicaragua, Nicaraguan against Nicaraguan, and they don't know nothing about your country. You don't know nothing about your country. You provide equipment, very old airplane that will cost the life of most of the or pilot, and that was a guerrilla who they spent United States spent too little money and we spent a lot of blood.
Yes, I could tell from the book that the question of the funding became so difficult because you started the war, the Contras had very little. I know that you mentioned the difficulties that you faced on your first patrols with, you didn't have the right kind of boots that you wanted and you were having to buy food from the locals and not much ammunition. And, sometimes it seems like the CIA would come through and then Oliver North and his crew came through because by the end of the war, you had red-eye missiles and all kinds of stuff.
But I believe it was not something like that. No, so because the United States knew everybody, all those guys know it how the war can be won. But this was a political warfare. So always the United States at some point went with the Sandinistas into Manzanillo talks, and the Sandinistas always say fuck you to the United States, and that's why the war continued. That is a political war. And most of those people who you mentioned, yes, they did a very, very good job. But in the tactical way, they helped to us also with the new radios, a lot of new equipment that we don't even imagine that exists.
Yeah, I saw a picture in your book, and you were using like encrypted radios with keyboards. I was not aware that those were even available in 1983, 1984, but I mean, you have a picture right there.
Yes, it is. I believe so. Very nice equipment.
Good. By the way, before we go on, I want to take a moment to fill you guys in on the newest tool I'm wearing and carrying in daily life. It's the Donovan non-metallic knife from Black Triangle. If you aren't familiar with Black Triangle, then you're really missing out. I love these guys because they put the dagger in Cloak and Dagger. If you've been following me for a while now, then you probably already know why Black Triangle has called their newest non-metallic knife the Donovan. It's named after General William Wild Bill Donovan, the head of the U.S. Office of Strategic Services during World War II. Under Donovan, the OSS was unconventional, unexpected, and highly effective, just like Black Triangle's tools. The Donovan is manufactured here in the United States. It's made entirely of G10 composite and comes with a thermoplastic sheath and a couple of amazing extras, which you'll have to see for yourself. You can find it at blacktriangle.com. That's blktriangle.com. You can also get 15% off your first order with Black Triangle using the discount code SPYCRAFT101 or by navigating to blacktriangle.com/SPYCRAFT101. I love mine, and I know you're going to love yours too. So, Luis, you were a frontline commander right from the beginning, and even at your very young age, you started out commanding a few troops, but eventually you were commanding hundreds of Contras, right? Just at like 23, 24 years old.
Yes, I am. I was the equivalent to battalion commander, brigade commander, and later I was chief operation in the general staff, commanding 18,000 men. That's pretty much
18,000.
my experience. And I begin in the National Guard, commanding a small unit of 30 men.
How many different patrols did you personally lead into Nicaragua? I know that they lasted weeks sometimes, and you went many times.
Well, how many incursion? Most of the incursion in the early time is we fight for 3 months, pretty much 3 months. So I don't count it all of them. I counted around 200 small operation that I did, and also one of them was commanding. Well, I prepared the attack of 7,000 men in the mine triangle, but I was the person who convinced all the commanders to do the fighting. I was the commanding the unit, and I make the decision at all time. Most of them by radio. but I was in commanding combat, a battle of 7,000 men against the two brigades of the Sandinista in the main triangle, which is Ciuna, Bonanza, and Rosita. So I had the experience from the small unit to the most big. If you want to ask me how many times I was in the first line, 52 times.
52 times.
52 times I was in the first line fighting, even combat, hand-to-hand combat.
Wow. Yeah, you were wounded at the beginning of the revolution in 79, but how many times were you injured during the war once you were with the Contras?
I was wounded 5 times, but two of them was heavy. The first one was the heaviest one was when I had a problem with a mortar and blow up my right hand and part of my arm, and also blood wounded my right leg. The second one was when I was fighting in a 82 mortar, I believe, because you don't know what is hit you, but I believe was 82 or 60 can be, but it put me in the air. It was so close that it almost killed me and leave me with two break on my left leg, my left arm broken, and a wound in my head. So that's the biggest one. Later, I was wounded also in my back again by Charnel and a bullet in my right feet. So that's pretty much my wound.
It's incredible. I could not believe how many times you came back to the fight after these injuries. So after you lost your right hand, you were only gone for about, what do you say, 43 days, I think, before you were back
Um,
at the base?
I was back in a month, just 43 days, a month and 13 days. I went back. Yes, I came back to my unit.
So I've seen the photos. You used the prosthetic, but how did you learn to shoot again? Because it was your right hand that you lost. Were you already left-handed, or were you right-hand dominant?
No, I was right-handed, but I was good to do my job, so I adjusted. It take me a while, to ride a horse with a hand, drive and shoot. But I learned it very well.
Hmm. So you could reload a weapon and everything eventually?
Yes, I do.
Hmm.
Yes, I did. I was able to shoot everything, and even with my pistol I was able to shoot in 39 or 20, 39 seconds, I
39
believe.
seconds? Wow.
Yes, I believe I was able to take out my gun and shoot
Hmm.
in 39 seconds. I practiced to do
Hmm.
so.
That was in 1983. Is that right?
But in 83, so in 84, I went back and I was able to, was good shooting. I learned it. I
Mm-hmm.
practice. It's practice. Everything is practice.
Of course, I can tell. And in, I think, April 1984, in your autobiography, you called it the longest day. That's when you were blown up by the 82 millimeter mortar. Is that right?
Yes, yes, a horrible experience. Believe me, I was thinking was one of the worst days, the longest day in my life. I was so bad that I don't even to think that I will survive that day. But I survived. I am here.
I couldn't believe it. As I was reading through it, it did not seem like you were going to survive, honestly, through the description, because they wouldn't even give you morphine because there was so little morphine, you said, that was available.
I was willing to kill my paramedic who hide from me the morphine. And I asked him, why did you hide it? Because you have to sleep, Commander. Okay, okay.
That was terrible. And you hurt your left hand then as well, right? So now both of your hands, one is lost and one is severely wounded again, right? Just in the same year.
Yes, that was broken,
Mm-hmm.
was broken. I was willing to kill myself because my throat wrong. And I was able to take my pistol with the broken hands and put it in below my head, because I was not willing to be captured. And one of my men say, "What you doing, Commander?" And he take me out the gun, but I was able to put even with my broken arm, I was able to. It's painful, believe me. To move a broken hand is not easy, but
Hmm.
I did. I was willing to do so, and I did.
Yeah, I didn't want to ask you about that because I thought it might be too painful to remember, but yeah, it was so shocking that you were there laying there after that explosion thinking you might have to take a bullet yourself rather than be captured by the Sandinistas in your condition, but I'm very happy that you were rescued from that and that you recovered.
Yes, I was recovered, believe me, and was horrible. A day before I was Elliot transport to an hospital was a horrible days with fever. That I don't know what was to kill me, the fever or the wound, but a combination was almost killed me. I believe was a horrible experience. It was a very unique experience. Okay,
It's hard for me to
a
imagine,
unique
truly.
experience.
Yes, for sure.
I was able to survive those. I am glad.
How long did it take you to recover from the second wound and go back into fight?
In the second one, I was able to go back when I was hit by the mortar. I was able to work in around 2 months and a half because I come to United States and Dr. Kirantes, a Cuban American guy in Miami, somebody else make a bracer who was able to instead of the cash, I receive a bracer and I was able to work in 2 months and a half or something like that. And I come back to combat again in November of that year. I went to another
Wow, you're
combat.
back.
Yes, and that time nobody hit me.
Just a few months later. Wow. So after that, I think that you spent more time on the general staff. Is that right?
Yes, until my last combat, which was in '87, when I commanded a troop against the Sandinista in San Andres de Bocay, and I went into a long range patrol of 2 months
Hmm.
in '87, May '87.
May 87. So more than 2 years after those wounds, you were still going on patrols sometimes.
Well, yes, I was able to work. Yes, very
It's
well.
amazing. What was it that, I mean, why didn't you retire after the second one? Why didn't you move to Miami or something like that? I mean, you had certainly fought a lot and you had certainly paid for it a lot. What made you go back again?
Well, it's because I know my enemies. I was a person who I believe always will be in jeopardy in Nicaragua. I has no regret, and I did not hold anything. I fight to win. I don't fight to make a deal. In the deal, I was supposed to be dead because it's like I speak with my friend in Commander Bermudez when he went to Nicaragua. Commander, they got to kill you, and they killed him. And I was thinking, if I went back, they can kill me. 429 Contras were killed after the war ended.
Really, after the fighting ended, 429 were, I guess, murdered, right? Is that what you
Well,
mean?
in a case, murder, and some of them slain, or some of them in a fight because after a war, there was a lot of hate between both sides.
Hmm.
It was so difficult situation
Hmm.
to be, and I was not willing to be in there because I was thinking they go to kill me. That was my way of thinking. I don't expect respect to me because I believe we were so in a big fight, bitter fighting that I don't think we go to, forget those things that happened. So I prefer to move to United States. I had already my family moved with me. That's
Hmm.
it. I don't regret. After that, I went to Nicaragua 10 years later, but I always taking some, security measure. That's it.
Yeah, I can imagine you would have to, especially after what else happened. Like you mentioned, Commander Bermudez was killed after the fighting ended. Everything. So it must have been very dangerous to finally go back even years later.
Yes, it's like I spoke with a friend of mine who was in the Dr. Timothy Brown and somebody else who was American politics people from the embassy. And I spoke with one of them, and I am not sure it was Timothy or somebody like Ceres or somebody else or the ambassador Everett Brick. I spoke with him and I tell, how long time it will be Nicaragua safe for me? And he say, well, we have to tell you, never because
Hmm.
in the Spanish Civil War, there were some people who has problem even at 50 years later.
50 years
because
later. Wow.
yes, that happened. That the price that we paid. All the people who fight in a war and fight in a bitter way as we did paid that price.
Hmm. That's incredible that you fought so much for Nicaragua, and even after the fighting is over with, you can't really go back. You can't stay there for long. Anyway,
No,
how
it
did that
was
make
not
you feel?
secure for me. It was not secure for me. For me, yeah.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Well, it's I am alive better than many people. So
That's true. That's a good point for sure. So after I wanted to ask you towards the second half of the war, you spent a lot of time more on the general staff and you were in charge of the counterintelligence against the Sandinistas, correct?
but that is was at the end because when I was willing to leave operation, the operation, I was the chief operation because when know after I know the Contras army go to into a peace agreement and United States don't go to give us a dime for fighting, I decided to change. I was so tired. You never go to be tired as I was, believe me. I was so tired and I moved to counterintelligence. But counterintelligence for me was like a resting before moving out. I
Hmm.
do my job also, but when I was in the chief operation, I was pretty much as a chief staff. So I deal with counterintelligence stuff, and I was always in everything. I was in on everybody, all the other staff member. Pretty much, I was like the chief of general staff. It was a chief operation, but chief of general staff was my position. Bermudez allowed me to do everything because he want somebody who keep everything tight, and I was a strong guy, who keep the rules. War has rule, and always there had to be somebody enforcing them.
Yeah, it was incredible how much responsibility you were given. It sounds like Bermudez trusted you more than he trusted just about anyone else.
Well, I don't believe he trust me. He believe he need somebody who work, and I was a good soldier,
Ah,
working hard every night, 7, 24 times 7. That's
hmm
my way.
yeah, I can see. And for it seems like for years on end, that's what you did. Just years and years. It was 24/7 work for you of one kind or another, whether the patrols or the planning or anything.
I was tired, believe me. You never go to believe somebody who was tired. I was tired.
I can imagine. So, can you tell me a little bit about what was counterintelligence like? I know that you mentioned that there were a lot of Sandinista infiltrators that tried to join the Contras.
The fighting against communists is very difficult. Believe me, we had so many people coming into the rank that in between there was a lot of people who coming from the Sandinista, and they do many damage, a lot of damage. They damage airplane in the back. They damage equipment, radio equipment. They damage heavy weapon like a M16 machine gun. So many of them become to lose one part, and later we discovered that was damaged by the people who infiltrated on us. So always was a fighting in the back. Always the Sandinista has so many people inside the Contra that we had to rely a lot in the counterintelligence side. So we created a unit of counterintelligence in every unit, so we keep everybody informed on how these people behave with those infiltrators that we get. It was a very difficult to fight a war against the community. They don't have rules. The first rule is to kill you anyway. It doesn't matter in the back or in the front, fighting or in an ambush. But that's the nature of war.
hmm
That's why, and the counterintelligence was very sensitive situation because at some point we had a Colonel Chernenko dealing with the order from the people in the State Department working for the human rights. But I was unhappy with them because I don't believe how do we go to behave and why they don't go to the Sandinista and say behave. They don't behave, but we have to behave. Was a stupid thing for me.
Hmm.
And Bermudez and I was very in disappointment with the State Department. But at the end, we believe that the situation of the again the counterintelligence at the end was simple a way of the United States helped to make an army. United States know how to destroy an army. That's the way it is,
Yes.
and they do.
So it sounds like you were very, very frustrated towards the end of the war because of the involvement of
I
other
am not
people in the Contras, right? Investigating the Contras.
yeah, but I was not unhappy because I know the pen of mine, Timothy Brown, tell me, Commander, in war you have losses. In politics you have losses. And you can be killed in the front, but you can be killed in politics also. So I understand the rule. The rule is no rule. And so I know disappointment. They give me the chance to leave the Contras army and move out. Because if I come back with the Contras army to Nicaragua, probably I will be in another place, not here.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. So you finally left. I think it was 1988 is when you finally left after 7 years.
I left the 29th of July, 89.
89.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And I do. I was bitter and sour, but later I understood the rule. Well, they had to destroy the Contras army, and they had to do it in the way that the Contras army can be dismobilized. Because as a friend of mine told me, I say, well, you have to take care of your soldier. No, your soldier go back to Nicaragua because nobody go to get an army of people who learn it to fight and do what you do in war. Fight.
Hmm.
So Nicaragua take care of everybody. In around 1,000 officers, they created in the Contras Army, moved to United States. According to a friend of mine, they said that around 1,000 moved as me, the same as well as me, to United
Hmm.
States. We were all a noble people working in so many different ways.
Wow. So that was the end of the war for you when you left, but the Contras already had come to a stalemate, I think you said earlier, with the Sandinistas.
Well, because we already in a status made, nobody win. They cannot destroy. We don't destroy them. We are, but both army have the ability to kill each other for 10 years or more if somebody decided.
So is that how the war ended? It was a stalemate that led to elections eventually?
Yes, because everything is politics. According to some of my friends, United States make a deal with Presidente Arias in Costa Rica, and they given to him a very nice peace agreement that was signed for all the five presidents of Central America, and all of them compromised to make election. So the Contras army was like the tools to move the Sandinistas from a position that they don't go to get any compromise to have a compromise for a free election. And
Hmm.
were they signed a treaty with the Central American and the Central and later with us. So that was the end of the war in a
Hmm.
stalemate and in a peace agreement also.
So now that you look back, it's been many years, of course. I know that you fought as hard as anyone did through the whole conflict. Do you see it as a victory for the Contras? I know it was like the only successful operation in Central America that the CIA was involved in, like you mentioned. But does it feel like a success to you? Did you accomplish what you wanted to?
Yes, it is. And also, I see the United States was so proud of what they do because they were at first winning a conventional war against the communists. Everywhere they've lost, I believe. So I believe that was the first unconventional warfare that United States took the pride to be successful. I believe that's what the feeling that I have from the CIA friend who I met in 2005 when I received medal from them. Specific, the CIA, Mr. Clarridge, made us to go to Washington to U.S. Navy, Army Navy Club, and we received a nice present, which was a medal from them. Pretty much was a way of thinking of the CIA, I believe.
Yeah, I saw that photo. I think you're standing next to Oliver North after you received the medal.
Yes, I was with Oliver North, yes.
So did you? I meant to ask you this earlier, but did you meet him during the conflict in 1984 and 1985, or was it only afterwards that you met him?
I met him, but I was not able to go into the meeting. He come over in an airplane to the Aguacare. Bermudez tell me he is the man in charge, but he don't want to be seen only by me and Calero, which was the political guy. And I know he was. I saw him, but I was not in a meeting.
Okay, I see.
And later I met him after the war, but I saw him when we were planning and receiving aid from him in '84, I believe.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
So what did you do after 1989? You moved to the United States. How did you just move forward in life after all of that fighting?
Well, in a way, it was horrible. With one hand, you had to adjust your life to a very difficult country. But for a soldier like me, this is an easy country. Has a lot. I do my job. I learn English. I went to the FIU, Florida International University. I get my degree, and nowadays I am accountant and tax prepare working in Jacksonville, Florida, just for my enjoy and keep my life happy with my family, my children, which they grow up. And well, I was a very happy guy who survived a war or two war.
I bet. It sounds like being an accountant in Jacksonville is a much more peaceful and stable life than being in
Nobody want to shoot my back.
Yeah. Your children, were they born after the war?
No, they were born during the war. In '85 was born Eloisa in Honduras, and Luis was born in Miami in '86, both of them. Nowadays, Luis is a chief in the Navy, chief petty officer in Virginia, and Eloisa is a supervisor in the lab of Cape Coral City.
I see. Well, that's wonderful that you've got your family close there,
Yeah.
and you're living a peaceful life finally. Did you say you went back to Nicaragua just one time after the war, or more than once?
No. I went back to Nicaragua several times. The first time, a friend of mine who was in the Contras army, who was captured by the Sandinistas, come to Miami and say, "You have to go back with me." No, they go to kill me. No, you have to. And he say, "But I have problem. They can accuse me for something that I never did." No problem. There are three law who say whoever do whatever happen in the war. So amnesty, three amnesty. I believe the Sandinistas need an amnesty, and they did for them three. That cover up.
I see.
In other words, a friend of mine come to Miami to take me into Nicaragua. So I went there and I stayed for a while. And nowadays, I believe, well, I went back several times. I enjoy Nicaragua, but I feel better in United States.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Do you worry anymore that will catch up with you? Do you worry that like someone who has a vendetta against you for the war still, or is that all in the past?
All the time. Believe me. At some point, I had an accident in the Carretera North Highway in Managua. And believe me, I feel the situation. A friend of mine come over and say, "Go to the hospital. Don't go to the police. They are a bunch of motherfuckers." He said to me so. And
wow.
I went and we go to the police tomorrow. I speak with a friend of mine who was in chief of the Gobernación ministry, who was over the police, and he is my friend. And I say, "Can you go with me, Dr. Rivera?" And he said, "Yes, of course, I go." And we go, and I feel the chief of the police in that area was a motherfucker Sandinista. That's the way it is. Oh, they don't like me. He don't like me too.
Wow. Well, yeah, I can imagine that would be concerning.
Yeah, because in that war we had to go over the police and the army. So that's the way it is. I believe all those guys have to be careful.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I don't blame you to survive the war, and then something like that catches up with you later on. So, Luis, you provided me your autobiography. Are you planning to publish it ever in English? I know a lot of people would like to read it, honestly.
Well, it's a bad book in English. I don't have the time to go over and make it. Yes, of course, I will do. Or I did already, but the book is not good. The book, because I don't speak very well English and I was not a good writer. I believe my story or my autobiography is better in Spanish than in English. So it's in Amazon also. It's named the Contras War from the beginning to the end.
Yes. I need to get a Spanish copy as well, honestly, but I can tell you that a lot of people would like to read your story for sure. I know, I mean, it probably needs to be edited or something like that, but it's an incredible story for sure. I just finished it a few days ago myself, and I was blown away by everything that you experienced and everything that you described in the book.
Well, it's just a book. I was compromised by Bermudez. Bermudez, my commander, tell me, Mike Lima, somebody had to write the story of us. So I am not alive. Bermudez speak four languages: Portuguese, Spanish, English, and something else. He speak four languages, and he was willing to do it, but if I was not able to do it yourself, so I did. I was a compromise that I get, and that's why I write that book. I just want to everybody knows what happened in a small fighting during the that time.
Well, I'm certainly glad that you wrote it and that you provided it to me as well. I appreciate it because it was very insightful for sure. Is there somewhere right now that people can connect with you online? Do you have a public social media page or anything like that for yourself?
Yes, I have it. I have it a page with all picture named Alberto D. Garcia, who has all the memories around the contract. But I created under some a surname because in Facebook, Alberto D. Garcia is in Spanish. It was for the people who want to see picture that nobody knows when they were, and I know where. And some of them were mine because they were given to me by the person who take the picture, like Jason Green Troy, the of Sigma. He gave me a lot of picture. Some of them, those pictures are there.
Okay.
And also, I try to, I am not interested in communication because I am busy and I am working all the time. But I have it those for people who want to know more.
Yeah, I'll put a couple of photos up when I talk about this podcast episode, and I'll direct people to where they can see more if they want. There's some fascinating photos for sure, so make sure that they can find them as well. And
But as I tell you, I just try to give this insight to everybody who want to know the sacrifice, even of some American. I remember some of them who come out as ideas to help in us and do things. Dana Parker and Jim Powell. They were two Americans from the CMA. CMI was an organization in Louisiana who helped the Contras Army, but they went into a mission and they were killed in a helicopter
oh wow,
with one of our pilots.
That's unfortunate.
Yes.
Okay.
Jim Powell and Dana Parker.
Gene Powell. Okay, I'll have to look him up for sure. Well, Luis, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about this. I know that people are really going to enjoy hearing about this from you just a few days from now when we publish this episode. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. I hope you have a nice day.
All right. Wonderful day. Take care, Luis. By the way, I want to share with all of my listeners one final postscript for this episode. I'm recording this segment several days after my interview with Luis. As I'm sure you can imagine, I'm constantly seeking out new guests for future episodes, and sometimes that takes weeks or even months of coordination before we finally sit down to record. In the meantime, there's a lot of back and forth as we get closer to the interview date. So right after I finished recording with Luis, I was in conversation with another future guest, one who I'm not ready to name quite yet. I mentioned I just finished recording an episode about the war in Nicaragua, and it turns out that my future guest not only served there, but he personally worked with Luis. In fact, they were together on the day that Luis lost his arm in that mortar explosion that he described. I wasn't aware of that yet, although I knew he'd been in many different places over the years. I was able to pass along Luis' contact information to my future guest, and the two of them are now in touch for the first time in about 15 years or more, I think. It feels great that in a small way through this podcast, I was able to reconnect a pair of Cold Warriors that had fallen out of contact with each other. And I'm also really looking forward to that future episode where we'll get a second perspective on the war in Nicaragua. Hopefully, I'll be recording that one in the next month or two. As always, thanks for listening to this episode of the Spycraft 101 podcast. If you're interested in supporting this program and all my other efforts, you can subscribe to my page at patreon.com. My patrons get exclusive access to long-form blog posts that dive deep into some of the most amazing stories in the history of espionage, and receive free or discounted books and products from the Spycraft 101 store. That includes a free PDF copy of my own book, Spy Shots Volume 1, 101 True Tales from the World of Espionage. I want to say a special thank you to everyone who has been a supporter for the last few months. Here's a quick message from one of my current patrons about why they chose to subscribe.
I listen to Spycraft 101 for the crazy stories of real people doing real things. Fantastic guests that describe amazing operations that are so outlandish that if it was in a book, I dismiss it as too far-fetched. Justin manages to deliver enthralling stories every episode.
You can also find lots more content on my Instagram page at Spycraft101 or at my website, spycraft101.com. Thanks again, and I hope you'll stick around because there's lots more to come.
Thanks for listening to this program brought to you by Daydreamer Network. If you enjoyed the episode, please don't forget to rate and review on Apple Podcasts or your preferred platform. Your feedback allows us to rank on the best new shows list and continue to grow our podcasts in order to bring more unique and talented storytellers to the network. To check out our shows, including programs about relationships, sports, business, nutrition, leisure, and more, head to www.daydreamernetwork.com. We look forward to seeing you back next week for another great episode. Have a wonderful day.